And joining us now here on the program, Nick King, AgriGold agronomist, is with us. Nick, good to catch up with you again. It's been a little while. Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing pretty good, Jesse. I appreciate you having me on. You doing okay?
I'm doing fantastic. Doing fantastic. A good start to the year so far, and I know a lot of growers are going through their winter meeting season, and that whole thing is kind of happening right now. Getting some education, making some decisions for next year. So a lot of things to think about, and I know there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to soybeans. We got different diseases we're fighting, etc. I know you conducted a replicated soybean architecture study to help guide farmers' seed selection decisions as we get into 2023. So, just on the surface, can you break that down? What is that? What did you do there to kind of help with farmers' decisions going into the spring?
Yeah, so we recognize that there's a lot of differences with soybeans today. We have different trait platforms, Enlist technology, dicamba, XtendFlex, a lot of trait platforms out there. And then we have varieties that differ in agronomics, how well they handle stress and other diseases. But what I didn't recognize in the industry to a large level was a study of soybean architecture. So essentially, how well a soybean branches, where it loads pods, just the overall structure of that plant. So I did conduct a study this past spring, this past 2022 growing season, and we planted 10 varieties at two different populations, 80,000 plants per acre versus 160,000 plants per acre. And I think this is done, around the country, but really focuses on yield. I wanted to focus on the soybean architecture. So I wanted to see if I gave plants space, would they make use of it? If I bump population up, could they compensate and redirect energy to potting on that main stem? So essentially just wanted to look at the different ways soybeans flexed in hopes that would help place beans better into the management styles that fit those beans best.
Very interesting, and that is a take that I don't think we hear about, is looking at the overall structure of that soybean plant. So what were some of the biggest takeaways you found with the study, Nick?
Yeah, so we were hoping when I went into this that I could categorize beans in different categories, but honestly had no idea what those categories would be. At the end of the study, I've kind of concluded that we have three different soybean architectures within this study, right? Only 10 varieties, so certainly not the entire AgriGold lineup, but recognize that some soybeans pod load on the main stem. So they're just stick figures, if you will, whether I'm at 80,000 or 160,000. These beans don't branch. They just want to continue to load pods and seed up on that main stem. Then we've got another soybean variety category, which would be if I give a soybean variety space, it will branch, but on those branches, there's no fruiting structures, there's no pods. So essentially, they just become vines, trifoliates that stretch out, maybe grabbing sunlight, but they're not producing any yield. And then that third category would be, a soybean plant at 80,000 will branch and provide fruiting structures and pods on those branches, making the best use of that vegetation. So, when you get to that middle category where soybeans don't exist on those branches, it's just a bunch of branches. In my opinion, we may be pulling back from that bean's potential because we're wasting energy on vegetation, building this vegetation, these branches that go out but never produce seeds. So any vegetation that these plants produce is requiring energy, nutrients, moisture. I just want to make the best use of that. So from that, I can start to place beans in the right management as far as population goes. Those soybean varieties that pod load on that main stem, they don't have any business being in low population zones. They really need to be maximized tight spacing, mid to higher populations. Whereas the beans that want to branch and make a bunch of beans on those laterals, maybe they have a little more potential pulling that population back and giving them space, allowing them to flex out. And then I think those beans that we found made branches, didn't necessarily make fruiting structures. Those are falling somewhere in that sweet spot of 120 to 140,000. So in this first year, I guess the big findings are a lot of our soybean varieties today do fit, in my opinion, that 120 to 140,000 planting population window, which is a broad thing for Southern Illinois. But I think we have identified some beans that we know confidently we can't place in those low population zones, and we have other beans we can confidently say we can't place those in the super high populations.
Very fascinating stuff. A question that came to my mind too, and I wonder, did soil type, did weather conditions have any impact on how these plants either branched out or didn't branch out, or set pods just on the main stem? Did soil type, weather, was that an impact at all, Nick?
So I would love to be able to answer that, but unfortunately, this was in one testing location in 2022. I'm fortunate to have a little 12-acre testing block, and this took up a majority of it. So
Mhm.
very long strips, two different populations, 10 varieties, takes up a lot of space. Soil type within that 12 acres really doesn't change all that much.
Mhm.
And, I would love to see this over multiple planting dates, and I didn't have that opportunity. So I guess unfortunately, I can't conclude that there was any difference by soil type or environment this year, but we are looking to move this project further next year by opening up more testing sites, more planting dates, and more environmental factors, if you will.
Well, yeah, it sounds like we need to expand this research a little bit. Nick, any other thoughts that come to your mind after looking at this research and this study when it comes to making those ever important seed decisions on soybeans, especially as we get into this growing season?
Yeah, I think it's going to be important for us to go through our entire lineup and classify soybeans. I equate it to corn, and it's maybe said too much, but we understand that corn ears flex in multiple ways, whether it's girth, length, kernel depth. There's a lot of ways a corn ear can change based on environmental and management practices. I really think it's important to emphasize that soybeans have that same potential, and going through an entire lineup, going through every bean that we have in our lineup, will allow us to better place this on growers. So, when growers are saying that we didn't get performance out of this bean, now we may have a little bit of background information to quantify why didn't this perform for you, or why did this excel on your farm.
Fantastic stuff. Well, and I'm sure if growers have any sort of questions about getting ready for spring, making seed decisions, etc., reaching out to a local agronomist with AgriGold, such as yourself, or going online, agrigold.com, all great ways to get started, isn't it, Nick?
Absolutely, Jesse.
Fantastic. Nick King with AgriGold. We appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, sir.